Welcome back, Red Spotters. Another show in the Red Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Alexis J. Soto, joined by Mr. David Francisco. And guess what we're here doing today? We're going to talk about, you guessed it, a TV show. Because why else would we be here, right? Only instead, as we've been doing the last couple of weeks, we've been recapping whole seasons, whole series. We recently talked about Harley Quinn and Invincible, and if you haven't checked out those shows or listened to our podcasts, they were such great conversations, and you haven't even watched those shows, what are you doing to yourself? Go watch these shows, please. They're some of the best shows on TV right now. But before then, of course, we had been recapping our Marvel TV shows, and it's something that David and I have actually, we stumbled into doing this because we wanted to do something special for the last season of S.H.I.E.L.D. last year. And we had such a good time doing it, and with 2021 and all these new Marvel shows, we just figured, you know what? Why the fuck not? Even though when we had decided to do when we had basically all but committed to doing a week-to-week recap of these shows, we were very iffy on how we were going to feel about the individual TV shows in terms of quality, in terms of storytelling. And while not perfect by any means, as we've been saying throughout the entire time, our expectations have been blown out of the water, and we were completely wrong on how good these shows, and how consistently good, I might add, these shows have been in the new Marvel shows here on Disney+. And so, yeah, this is basically a new tradition now, and I can't think of a better person to do this in with David, since I'm pretty sure we're gonna fall in the same line, especially because a lot of people are really jumping up and down about this first episode, and this is Loki. This is going to be the first recap for Loki, which is, at the moment, and as far as it's been publicized, going to have 6 episodes, similarly to how Falcon and the Winter Soldier did. We will be here every single week, and we will give our initial impressions of the episode first and foremost, spoiler-free. And then David and I will discuss the episode as it happened in sequence to make sure that we can cover just about all of the stuff that happens on screen, and a lot of it actually appears for a couple of seconds, since we're dealing with Marvel, and Marvel has many Easter eggs and perhaps some clues for what may happen in the future. So this is our episode here on Red Spotlight number 328. David, let's first start with asking you, how have you been, and how much have you been looking forward to this show?
I'm doing good. And I've been looking forward to it since the first trailer, I guess, everything that they showed. This is one of the only ones where we have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. With WandaVision, I hoped that they would tackle, the loss that she had, because we all knew, wow, she lost everyone in the MCU.
Yeah.
I kind of just hope for a little bit of weirdness from what the concept of House of M was, and also just from the trailer too. And then Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we all knew exactly what that was going to be, him becoming Captain America and everything. With Loki, though, we had absolutely no idea. We knew... What did we know?
We knew it had Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah.
We knew that it had Owen Wilson, and we knew that it was going to take place in a space that wasn't exclusively Earth. And it was going to feature some intergalactic, maybe some timey-wimey Doctor Who time agent stuff, just based on those trailers. It was something that we weren't expecting, and it was one of these teaser trailers that when it first dropped, it completely changed the way you saw this project, when this was announced alongside, of course, WandaVision and The Falcon and Winter Soldier. And granted, I think we've said the exact same thing about those shows in the beginning as well. But with Loki, it's it really felt like, man, Loki's dead. His arc in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's complete. There's nothing really left to say here. Or so we thought.
Yeah.
Or so we thought.
we did also knew that it was gonna start the way it did. Like, we knew exactly where it was going to start.
Right.
That was one thing we got.
Avengers Endgame kind of alluded to it. I mean, once it was announced, you can kind of put the pieces together. We knew that it was going to be about Loki and him breaking off in a different timeline because of what happened in that second act of Avengers Endgame. That was for sure. The Loki that is in, I guess, Marvel Universe 101 or whatever you want to call it, that one's dead. And we're talking about a Loki that has broken away from the timeline altogether. And so that's kind of, we knew the bare bones basic of what it was going to be, but it wasn't until that teaser that we got a little bit of a taste for what it was going to feel like, for what it was going to look like. And the trailers that followed afterward and the TV spots only continued, I think, to increase the anticipation and even also kind of the appeal of this show. There's a lot to say, obviously, but to begin with, lately, the trailers have been painting a real positive picture. But it's also because of how good WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier have been that have also been, pumping me up for this show.
Yeah.
They are really, really being consistent. In a way, I can't remember the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever being this consistent.
No, yeah, true. No, yeah, and then, look, yeah, like you said, we had pretty high expectations for this show, and the first episode, I think it did a good job in like making me interested in what's going to happen in this plot, especially from that ending, actually. But for first impressions of the show, Tom Hiddleston, he's gonna be a knockout in this. Owen Wilson, I think I might enjoy him. I'm very curious as to how him and Loki are gonna get along throughout this show and how their relationship might grow, especially because of I think it was Kevin Feige that said like, oh, I think people might really enjoy this relationship. Might be like, he's hoping that this might be our favorite duo, I guess, in the MCU shows, or I'm not sure, in the MCU as a whole.
There's a lot of duos in the MCU.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm kind of excited for that. As to the concept of these time cops, the
TVA, the Time Variance Authority. That by the way, that has to be some of the best sounding, pleasant to the ear, just acronyms of all time. It's just so easy to say. TVA, TV show, TVA, the Time Variance Authority.
Even their logo though too, I like what they did. It was literally just like a weird, it's basically like a weird W almost in a way, but yeah, I like it. But I mean, I like concepts of other dimensional beings, I guess.
Multiverse.
Multiverse.
We'll get to that now in a minute.
Just other dimensional beings, like tackling the whole universe, balancing it out, I guess, in a way. But yeah, I mean, and I like what they did in this first episode as to how they handled his arc, I guess, of what we've already seen, and how I guess it's going to be giving us a hint how it's going to be handled in this show and everything. But yeah.
So let's see here, Loki. Let's get a couple of facts out of the way with, in case we'll be referring to them, to these particular people. So, to recap, the Disney Plus shows, when it comes to Marvel, for reasons that haven't been really all that made clear, unlike most television shows, they do not hire showrunners. At some point, perhaps David and I may have made mention to Jack Schaefer or Matt Shackman that worked on WandaVision, perhaps also Malcolm Spallman and Katie or Kate Skoglund from Falcon and Winter Soldier as showrunners. It turns out we were incorrect in using those terms. They were referred to head writer and head director. And there's actually a fascinating story about that in Variety, I believe, about how that is causing a lot of heartache and tension amongst the television industry. And whatever Disney or Marvel in particular is planning on doing this, I think part of the reason for why it's this way is because they don't want to take away from the esteem of the Midas touch of Kevin Feige, because he ultimately is the grand showrunner of this ever expansive Marvel Cinematic Universe. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I would hope that fans, Marvel fans, fans of television, fans of film, would also recognize that as much involvement as Kevin Feige has in everything, that should not diminish the actual writers and directors that work on these shows. And don't forget the names of people like Jack Schaefer and Matt Shackman. They should be showrunners. I don't know why they insist on them not being that way. And the article, if you read it, really goes into this paranoia going out there that directors are being given more power to overwrite the actual writers. And in case you weren't aware, unlike movies where directors are basically the head honchos of the projects and the writers are kind of like, down a couple of pegs, it is completely opposite in the realm of TV. In the world of TV, it is the writer, the showrunner that is in charge of these projects, not the individual television directors, which is why, if you remember, years and years ago, when Mandalorian Season 1 announced its list of directors and everybody was like going, and over them, we were like, why? Their television directors can add flair, they can add style. And we know how a television director can make a great episode of a series. Do not misunderstand me diminishing them. But they are not the signature stamp. They are not the creative stamp of the series. Kind of like how in theaters this week and on HBO Max, we have In the Heights coming out. In the Heights is not directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is basically the creator of this entire passion project. That is his. He's producing, but he ain't directing. It's John Chu. But of course, in this instance, Lin-Manuel is the one who is getting all of the praise, as he should, not John Chu. I wanted to make that clear before we go off into this, and all I wanted to say is to know these people's names, because we're going to be referring to Michael Waldron, who is the creator / head writer of the series, and Kate Herron, who is the main director for these episodes. David, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a reason why cable shows, there's a reason why they usually get the actors from their shows, even the stars, to direct some episodes. I know the CW shows, what's her name? Melissa Benoist. I gotta butcher her name, but Shyler Leigh, I think that's her name. Both characters from the show Supergirl, they've directed episodes of that show. The reason why they do it is because it gets kind of cheaper to just get them.
Oh yeah,
to direct a few episodes and everything. Because again, and I mean, like you said too, it's not to diminish the directors. Yeah, they add their own flair. It's good for the actors to kind of if they ever want to direct their own stuff one day, that's great practice for them. It's just that, they're not as important as the writers, especially because for cable television, they'll write a few episodes and then they're not there for the filming process. But once they see the pilot episode going up and everything, then they start seeing things like, oh shoot, that's how they're delivering this. That's how they're gonna go about this. Okay, we gotta rewrite some stuff to make it fit what the directors are doing. There's always a miscommunication between the writers and the director for the shows and everything, but the writers are the ones that keep it consistent in a way.
Absolutely, and it's honestly a trope of television across the board, as you mentioned. Remember, Robin Wright directed a couple episodes of House of Cards. Lana Parrilla directed a couple episodes of Once Upon a Time. These are, of course, actors that were part of the show. Robin Wright was Claire Underwood on the series. Lana Parrilla was the Evil Queen. in the show. In Shield, when we covered that last season, we had people like Clark Gregg, Elizabeth Henstridge. These are the actors, direct their own episodes. It's very common for this to happen. And oftentimes it can be good. Sometimes it'll be whatever, but it is kind of the industry standard that is there, right? But what I found humorous in that is that Marvel just seems to ruffle feathers anywhere they go. Like, they can't catch a break. And it's like, well, it's a shame because I honestly feel like they are making some great fucking television. Like, just the 2 TV shows that Marvel Studios, I want to reiterate that Marvel Studios has produced. You can choose if you want to include Marvel Television, because there's some great shows that Marvel Television has produced. Let's be real about that. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to just talk about Marvel Studios productions, in these last 2 shows, they have, in my view, easily eclipsed over half of the movies that they've made.
Yeah, for sure. And we should also mention that what they're doing now. It's completely new in a way. Like, we've never really seen anything like this before in any television show in terms of budget, effects, and everything. So, they are ruffling some feathers on the inside and everything, but they're trying to make something new and different. So, to really entertain everyone and everything. So
they're making great television, man. They just are.
So this is a bit of a process, and hopefully they can just kind of get the idea. Like, hey, let your writers do what they're doing. Don't try to make your own thing in every single point of the show.
Yeah, these shows, they live in a cinematic universe, but what I am appreciating so much about them is that they're more than just that. Mm-hmm. That's just the cover, basically. That's the frosting on top. But they're their own stories, and they're fleshing out character. Those are their priorities, and it's something that honestly I just didn't expect. And I'm so glad that I'm wrong, because we're getting some great stuff, honestly. And I'm just happy about all of that. When I usually just space out like that is because I completely lost my train of thought. So there's that. Before we get into my thoughts on the episode, I do want to keep track that at some point, Miss Moreno and Mr. Lira on the Fantasy Fair podcast will talk about Loki. They may just wait and talk about it at the very end. I love how they do that. David and I talk about that week to week, and they act all clutch coming in at the end like, we'll just talk about it ourselves as well. Sure. Okay. But if you want the best content, you want the longest detailed conversations on these shows, the podcast to listen to. So there is that. So yes, let's get into this with Loki. I really loved this pilot. I loved it because of how much fun it was. Let's get the easy stuff out of the way with. The performances are great. Tom Hiddleston is always great as Loki. And I think it's a testament to how great he is in this role that he keeps coming back. Granted, we're at the point where what Marvel characters don't come back from the dead? There's a long list of them. But with this one, he keeps coming back. He keeps finding different interpretations of Loki to latch onto to really captivate our interest. And I think what this episode kind of nailed the best, I think it nailed a lot of things real well, but it once again creates, it's the third pilot for these series in a row that is, I think, just fantastic. Absolutely. And I think primarily most because of the moments that it lets us have with this character, to have this space and to just react and process. And this has kind of been the conversations that are had in this episode with Loki about Loki, because he has no choice but to discuss himself here, are the kind of questions that perhaps we have all wondered about this character for the entirety of the MCU, but we were never afforded the chance to actually have this discussion because of, much more important things having to be, done in these movies. And so the same thing with what happened with Wanda and with Sam. When you give these characters and these actors the opportunities to really flex their muscles, you end up with some of the best characterization stuff that the MCU has done. And Tom Hiddleston, played all sides of Loki, the comedic elements, also, some of those great emotional moments, just breaking moments that we rarely get to see Loki have. Mm-hmm. And in some ways gives us a new way of looking at him that perhaps many of us weren't before. And it does the thing that I think it needed to most, which was giving us a reason to watch a character that we pretty much were left fine with, that was dead. We could very well have easily moved on. But it keeps doing what Marvel keeps doing, is they find ways to use old dead characters, but just find new interpretations of them that make them interesting. I mean, we just discussed this with what was it? Not just White Vision, but the new Vision that wasn't really Vision, but you know what I'm talking about. They'll do this with Gamora. They did it with Nebula in the older version of it. Of course, we have Coulson. How many versions of Coulson were there at this point? They keep doing this, and yet against all odds, it keeps working. It keeps working. If all you're here for is Tom Hiddleston, if all you're here for is Loki, which I mean you should because it is the name of the show, this is exactly what you get, man. Like, I will never be tired. I mean to say, I will never be tired of watching Tom Hiddleston playing this character. And I don't know, ultimately, the storylines that have been set up and as far as the main mission that's set up here, I don't know how this is all going to end. And if I'm being honest with you, a lot of the things that were being discussed as far as the quote-unquote rules, we need to talk about that. Because there are so many questions. A lot of things maybe went over my head. Yeah. But, yeah, for sure. But I am wondering if this alongside Falcon and Winter Soldier may be one of the series that may in fact return. Because they don't necessarily, if this is a new version of this character, it doesn't have to end here. Mm-hmm. Whatever 6-part story they have planned, especially if it's this popular. And for one reason or the other, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well, based on social media reactions, this show has kind of blown the other two out of the water in terms of how like crazy excited it's gotten people. Why? I mean, I personally wouldn't say that this beats the pilot of the other two by any means. I'm not going to sit here and rank. It's WandaVision. That's the one. That's the pilot where I would say is the first one. But I think they're all great pilots and they're all great episodes. Why people are latching on so much to this? Maybe it could be Loki. Or it could be a bunch of timey-wimey stuff that cats people just so like crazy stuff about. Mm-hmm. All right, so putting that to the side, Owen Wilson's terrific. I can't remember Owen Wilson ever looking this good or ever being as good as he is right now. Like, this is probably the perfect role for him in the MCU, and I cannot wait to see more of him and Loki together. He just sounds, and he's interesting because he's one of the only people, quote unquote people, at the TVA that shows something more than just standard foot soldier, just like standard time agent. Like he genuinely seems more like a person and less than a interdimensional time traveling above it all, I don't care, I'm here to kill you, bye. Like he and especially his interactions with Loki in particular speak more to it. And so that sparks a lot of interest about what may happen in the future. So I think it's great to see there. Ooh, the aesthetic, the production design. And what I mean by that, just the look of this time variance authority, this headquarters. You know, as you've seen from the trailers, it's emulating, I think, this 70s aesthetic, if I'm not mistaken, like this 70s office-like environment. I wasn't alive in the 70s, so I can't accurately say to you this is what it looked like, but it feels like this is what it would look like most. Which is pretty, what's the right word here? I don't know if quaint, well, maybe quaint would be the right word, but this is pretty quaint for what ultimately may be the greatest power in the universe. I mean, they seem to control timeline, and they're just basically a 70s office. You know? Yeah. So, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah.
And they also mention it in the show, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. The music. The music's really good. You notice it, man. Like, I don't know if it was going for what, I forget the composer's name, but I think it's Marcus, I can't pronounce his last name, but he did the score for Thor Ragnarok, and Thor Ragnarok had a very techno 80s-ish inspired score to it. There weren't a lot of synths, but it was a lot of techno stuff, basically. And there was a little bit of it here, especially, and I think that the music especially captured just the weirdness, the out there-ness of that time variance authority. Across the board, it does everything a pilot needs to do. It has great performances. It has great moments. The writing, I think, is real spot on. It seemingly commits hard to certain rules about what this time variance authority is. And I don't know if maybe it's just me, but I have a lot of fucking questions. Because a lot of it seems to fly in the face of what we know. And so if that's the case, are we setting up another mystery box here about who the time variance authority is and what they actually do? Is all of this a ruse? What's actually happening here? So I think this show, more than Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think this one may create another mystery box element where people are going to be going crazy hard with the theories. And we didn't even have to wait like seconds, because when the episode went live on Disney Plus last night, immediately, guess what trended? Mephisto, X-Men, you name it. It's like, there you are. There it is. Like, you've learned nothing, but okay. This is where we are. Remind me real quick, David, I don't want to cut you off here, but I think Nando versus Movies did create a new video about the danger of fan theories. So let's put a pin in this, and I want to circle back to it next week if we get a chance to talk about it. But go ahead. Oh, by the way, those are my... I'm sorry to cut you off again. I want to say those are my initial impressions. I had so much fun. I thought it was a great episode. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the Mephisto thing, who I think it might have been the head writer who said that Mephisto is not in the show at all. Like, that was like a few days before Loki premiered, and then people still made Mephisto predictions. So it's just why. Yeah, but yeah,
I know why though. It's because in the opening moments of the episode, I think it may have been the first scene where you see Owen Wilson.
Yeah, there
is emphasis on this. In this, God, what's the damn name of it? But this window, this
stained glass window.
Yes, that's the one. Thank you. I don't know architecture clearly. The stained glass window that has the devil on it, and that's why Mephisto is trending.
I understand why. Like, I totally get it. Like, oh yeah, devil. Mephisto is the literal devil of the MCU. Like, I get that. It's just that, the writer said there's Mephisto is in this. So it's like, why make the theory in the first place?
And you know why he said that? He said that because they didn't want to come. He didn't want the people to come for him like they did Jack Schaefer and Matt Shackman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's exactly why. It's like, you know what? Don't bother. It's not happening. Please move on. And it still didn't make a difference.
Yeah.
So, there is that. So, David, there we have it. Those are our opening thoughts for this episode. We're now going to get into what happens. So if you haven't seen it yet, pause and then come back and recap with us once you've watched the episode. So, David, take us back in time. Shall we, to Avengers Endgame, where we start the Loki. I just want to say real quick, I think it started the way it should have started. Especially with how we knew what this was going to be. It was a perfect way to open up the series. It was so much fun seeing that. But go ahead.
No, yeah, I mean, like I said before, like we knew exactly how the show was going to start, and it was in that scene in Avengers Endgame where he takes the Tesseract and everything. But finally got to see what happens next, and so, but yeah, he gets the Tesseract, like opens a portal, and he lands in the desert, like literally, like crash lands into the desert and everything. And he does his speech again. What was it? It's like, I'm Loki, I'm burning with glorious purpose. I think it was like that.
That is the name of the episode, as a matter of fact.
Glorious purpose, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the people there just like cut him off immediately, like, who are you? Because like they don't understand his language, so I thought it was funny. But as that happened, that's when we see the time variance, like immediately. In the beginning of this episode, they come in and are just like, okay, there's the guy, and you see they're holding a machine, and it's showing that the timeline is veering off into another timeline.
A branch reality.
Into a branch reality, that's what it's called. And so they just get him, they hit him in the face and somehow put him in this like slow-mo bubble and put a necklace on him. And so they just put the necklace on him, cuff him, and take him back to their dimension, I guess. But when they did that, they put this like machine on the floor, and not sure what it does exactly. Like it's supposed to reset the timeline. But
and therein lies our first couple of confusing questions. First of all, let's pause here because there's some things I want to cover. This may sound like this is probably beneath me to say, and it goes without saying, but that use of slow-mo was far more inventive and interesting than anything Zack Snyder ever did with it.
Oh,
it was too easy. It was too easy, but hey, it was there. How could I not reach for it? Second thing, so they, as you that charge you said that they put on the ground, and you didn't know what it was supposed to do. I was okay. I think I got what they were supposed to do from the beginning, and that made me super confused for a lot of reasons, or for actually a big reason. But let's get into what I think what was supposed to, and I feel they later confirmed this at the end of the episode. So they captured Loki, they removed him from the timeline, or the branch timeline that he created, and so this charge is supposed to reset the timeline. And so once they've eliminated the variant, in this case being Loki, this charge erases the branch that was created in the first place because of the variant. And so that branch reality gets erased, and then everything goes back to normal, and a new version of Loki appears in this timeline, only this time the Tesseract was never lost by the Avengers, and Loki ends up still being captured and brought to Asgard, and it stays the course of what we saw in the MCU. That's, I think, what happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember how the Russos and Marcus and McFeely made a big deal of them not agreeing on how their rules of time travel worked in Avengers Endgame? We've discussed this several times. Recall that oh boy, God, this hurts my head every time to bring it up, and I'm trying to remember what the actual rules were. I think it was that the Russos were of the mind that when a person goes back in time and things change, they create a branch reality, no matter what. But the writers, Marcus and McFeely, were adamant that it is the time stones, not the time stones, the infinity, excuse me. The time stone is one of the infinity gems, the infinity stones. It is the infinity stones that create the flow of time, as the Ancient One explained in Endgame. And that when one of them are removed, that is what causes the creation of branch realities. Okay. Remember how we left off Endgame, where like Cap basically needed to go back and put the Infinity Stones back in their place to erase the branch realities that were created by the Infinity Stones.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I'm lost, because everything I just said completely flies in the face of everything they tell you here. I don't understand how any of the pre-established rules of time travel coexist with this time variance authority. Because, and as we will find out, as you know, we get to these moments in the episode, they are basically kind of like the Time Lords from Doctor Who, if the Time Lords from Doctor Who actually gave a shit about the flow of time. The Time Lords in Doctor Who are not really timekeepers. They're just kind of elitist bastards that just control time travel materials. In this timeline, I guess you could say, the timekeepers actually protect the flow of time. And it's mentioned in the episode that they were aware of the Avengers time traveling, and then they were also aware of Loki doing something else with Heimdall messing with time previously before all this happening. So it creates a lot of questions. Like, the writer Michael Waldron said prior to this debut that they wrote this so airtight because they knew that fans would be picking it apart. And I believe him when he said this. So if this is the case, I'm left wondering, just off the bat, by this charge being set in place and all the quote unquote rules that are like going to be revealed later on in the episode, I'm left wondering if a lot of the information that we're told here about the TVA is a complete ruse. Because you see what I'm saying here? It's like the time traveling rules, quote unquote, that were established, because like they flat out say at some point there is no multiverse. But wait a minute, Marvel is currently working on like 2 multiverse movies, the Multiverse of Madness and Spider-Man all coming back home, whatever they're gonna call it. Like it might as well be called Home Base, I don't know, whatever. But the thing is, like, they're making multiverse movies, but here they're saying there's no such thing as the multiverse because the Time Variance Authority are the ones that make sure that no multiverse happens, that there's only one timeline, because there were these multiverse wars. I know I jumped ahead a couple of spaces, but I wanted to get that. I wanted to just get that out of the way with now. That way we don't have to like go back and forth over it. Okay. What do you think of all of this?
Yeah, I get it. So let's just kind of move a bit of the plot. So basically, they get Loki, they process him in the TVA and all that, and then at one point he gets in line.
David, you're gonna hate me. You're gonna hate me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, man. I there was something I should have said also after that Zack Snyder thing that I needed to say. Sorry. okay, let's just stick to the pin real quick. We're going to get back to Loki being transferred over to the TVA, but let's just stick with the desert. There are some impressive visual effects in the episode. That scene was not one of them. That was pretty, it wasn't terrible, but it was obvious green screen. They were not in a fucking desert. I don't even think that was even sand they were standing in. Like, because a lot of the sequences that you'll notice if you go back and watch it, like, it's just an obvious green screen behind, like, Tom Hiddleston. So, again, I don't mean to be, like, hypercritical of these things, but these are the shows that apparently have the budgets to prevent things like this. And remember, to the quote-unquote reports, although nobody on this network believed them, that they wanted to make it appear that Marvel shows that the episodes cost $22 million an episode to make, which is completely ludicrous. But if it did, they'd have the money to fix things like this. It wasn't bad. It wasn't a complete distraction. It did nothing to ruin my enjoyment of the sequence, but it was noticeable. I just wanted to say that out there. So that's it. I wanted to mention that. So as you were saying, Mr. Francisco, we arrive at the TVA.
Yeah, so he's in line to, I don't know what the next thing, to like get to court or something. But as he was in line, that's when we see this, I guess, infomercial, I guess, of what the TVA is. And they explain that at one point, there were multiple universes, and those other universes went to war for each other, for supremacy, I guess. And
sounds like the fucking Crusades.
And then and basically just a bunch of chaos was happening, and the multiverse just kept spreading and spreading. And so what they called, the three time. What were they? Time Lords, whatever.
The Timekeepers?
Yeah, the Timekeepers. They were like, okay, everyone chill out. We're just gonna combine all the universes and create one timeline, the sacred timeline. And so that's where the time variants come in. If someone veers off from the sacred timeline, time variants come in, take him out of the timeline, and just basically put a replacement there to keep the flow of the sacred timeline. When Loki goes to court, they ask him, like, are you the time variant that veered off of this timeline and everything? And he's like, no, that was the Avengers. They clearly went back in time to stop me from ruling Earth. And not because of Thanos, of course not. And everything. And it's just like, no, we let the Avengers go back in time. That's part of the sacred timeline.
We let them. What does that say about free will? I wonder how much of a theme that's going to be. It was in this episode.
Yeah, that's a big thing going on in this show, is that basically everything has been predetermined. What you see in the past 20 movies, that was already predetermined by the timekeepers. Yeah, basically. As I don't know, it's just everyone's making like a really big deal of it. I generally just don't understand how that's bad in a way. I mean, like we don't have free will in this certain scenario. Like, that's the bad part. What I'm not understanding though is that people are like, oh, you've taken away the stakes of the movies in the past because it's already predetermined. And I'm just kind of like, not really. I don't know.
Okay, I don't view it that way, and I think you're touching on a bigger thing here. If we can put that to the side for a minute, and we are going to get to it, because and I've noticed it as well, that there are some fans that have, of course, they took to social media, and you see certain trends about some of the criticisms of what is established in the episode. And I think, as per usual, there are some takes that are dumb and are kind of indicative of how like what you just said, some people just don't understand the basics of storytelling 101. So we'll address that in a minute, okay? But let me just backtrack to a couple of things. So am I to understand that, look, let me just be clear about where I stand. I'm not upset at any of like the things that I feel like are in contradiction with what came before. I think it's all done intentionally. I don't think it's, at least from what I understand, I don't think it's done to like break whatever rules came beforehand. I think they have to abide by it really much of anything. I'm just very curious by what they're building toward when I point out all these inconsistencies. But it is very well realized. I'm not at all with the people who you were, I think, alleging, you were talking about at that moment.
No, yeah.
Okay, couple of things, because there were a couple of great, just wonderful moments to see that we kind of skipped over that I want to make sure. And when Loki arrived at the TVA, we mentioned this in one of the trailers, but it is just hilarious. They take him to this fucking rope, like it was basically Karen from SpongeBob with these scissor hands, and it just like completely destroyed his armor. A lot of people on Twitter, speaking of Twitter, they were it took their breath away to see Tom Hiddleston, let's just say without any clothing. So there was that subset of people. And then he gets dropped. I love how he gets dropped lower and lower into a different, like, I guess, weirdly box. And so he gets dropped into these, I guess, prison clothes. And then he meets, and it's the scene from the teaser where he is in front of this guy at a desk, and he's like, "This is everything you ever said. Please sign it." And he's like, "What?" And another fucking paper prints out, a whole sheet of paper prints out. And then I think it includes where it says what, and then he says, "This is absurd." The comedic delivery in that was perfect. Some touches that I think were intentional. Loki gets freaked out when he sees a cat. I think many people rightfully guessing that wasn't a cat and it was a flurkin. What's Goose, right? Goose from Captain Marvel. Yeah. Where is that cat? I just want to know where it is. That was hilarious. And then he gets dropped into it looks like you're in line at the DMV. Only there were like two people here, and like they were saying, "Take a ticket." And obviously, just like the people or the variants, Loki included, being very confused about what the fuck is going on here. But Loki got a first-hand experience for what it means to piss off the time agents. When one of the variants did not cooperate by getting a ticket, they were just killed. I think vaporized is maybe the better way of saying it. It was just like instantly just vaporized. And the way that freaked out Loki was so fun. It was just funny to see. Like, that's just great touches of comedic brilliance by Tom Hiddleston's part. And then we get to the moment where he is standing trial. And it's just a great reminder of how smart Loki was. I didn't get the impression, because there were a lot of distractions in the movie Avengers Endgame going on in that sequence, but I wasn't thinking about how Loki was like, oh yeah, Loki was aware of like the fact that there were like multiple versions of Tony Stark around. But that line was so clever. Like, I could tell that there were two Tony Starks based off the cologne, which is hilarious. And of course the assumption that, of course, oh yeah, they came back to stop me from my ascendancy to rule the world. Which just reminds you of how much of a diva he is and full of himself. And it's funny and also sad, because that's not what happened, Loki. That's not really where they're here to stop somebody, but it ain't you. So that was interesting to see. But yeah, it almost feels like I don't know what's the right word of saying this. It is a kangaroo court, basically, because like all the variants assuming that they all come through here, they're all proven to be guilty and they're basically reset. And I think the implication, I didn't catch this, but I noticed somebody else talk about this in the review. The implication is that maybe a lot of the time agents are just reset variants.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I thought maybe like whoever they pick that was a time variant, they just automatically get put into the TVA and help out, or they just put somewhere and not, they don't become like agents or anything like the one lady that knocked out Loki. But they just end up doing something within the TVA. And so I don't know. But I'm curious though as to like how they go about it. Like, do they wipe their memories, or do they just get automatically put somewhere?
Yeah.
Or, that's one thing I'm curious about.
Yeah, me too.
But to go back onto the whole thing of Avengers time traveling back and just kind of like the whole concept of a time variant, or what is it, a branch timeline and everything.
Yeah, because like Steve Rogers is basically a time variant, or Peggy Carter. I mean, I guess like.
Not really though, because again, they were. It was okay for them to go back in time and do what they did,
right?
And so them going back in time was supposed to happen. Them taking the time stones was supposed to happen. Now, yes, taking a time stone will create a branch reality. But the thing, though, that made it okay for them to do that is that they were going to put it back in place.
Right.
And so, which they mentioned in the movie, that it'll make the branch timeline disappear, basically.
Right.
And so that's what made it okay. Now, the thing, though, that will create branch timelines are those little things that they did. So it was mostly Steven that did this, but like him telling that one guy that he's Hydra when he was in the elevator and he says like, "Kill Hydra." Like that probably created a branch timeline, maybe. Him fighting himself and saying that Bucky's alive, that probably created a branch timeline. And
well,
now,
technically, hold on a minute. Actually, maybe all that was undone. Maybe when they reset that timeline, maybe that was just one of the things that was corrected.
I really hope. This is the one show where I feel like they can't avoid references of the MCU. Yeah. So, like, I really hope they do kind of like deep, just like every episode, just give us a little answer of like how this whole thing works and everything. And I hope one of them is that they mention like, oh yeah, no, we just fix whatever possible branch timelines they created and everything.
Okay, here's a question. So, one of the implied endings of Avengers Endgame is that Steve Rogers goes back at the end of his mission and lives with Peggy Carter. But because he does that, he ends up creating a branch reality. What happens to the branch reality he created when he comes back to the main timeline? Is it just erased?
I think so. I mean, but the thing though, that's what I assumed before the show. What I assumed is that he just created a branch reality and everything, but he went back to our timeline, and I wanted that theory to be true because if Steve Rogers had stayed throughout the Holocaust and all the things, because he stopped certain big disasters that happened between World War II and the present time. I wanted to believe that there's no way he was just going to stand on the sidelines and let those things happen. Now, the thing though with the show now is that he was creating a branch reality though, but they have to stop it at a certain point where it hits the nexus point, which is basically like just, I guess it's sort of like an imaginary line between the sacred timeline. And for some reason, they gotta stop it between that point, or else that's when it'll cause even more branch realities. and just more and more and more, basically. And so that's the thing that kind of confuses me, is that, okay, he lived a life with Peggy, but how did his universe not get erased? How did he not get arrested at some point? Because he clearly created
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
that's the big one. But for me though, everything else I think it's fine. I think in a way.
Well, I guess maybe the answer could be. I guess the answer could be the TVA just allowed it.
Maybe.
Is that the easy answer?
I mean, I feel like the easy answer might be is just that they're lying about the sacred timeline thing.
That's true. That's what I suspect anyway.
And maybe because like they said, like the multiverse, each universe was fighting for supremacy. Which universe was the better, I guess, universe? And maybe they could say that the timekeepers lied and said like, oh no, we combine all the timelines into one, but not really. We just we mostly just. Like that was just a bit of a lie so that each universe can stay on their own universe, I guess. Or maybe they did cut down the multiverse into like, I don't know, a dozen, and then they just try to like focus on not teetering off anymore or something. Like a certain number of multiverses can only be allowed. I don't know. Hopefully they explain it.
David, I think my mind just crashed at least 5 times in this conversation. Yeah. And if I have a hard time keeping up, good Lord knows how the audience feels right now. Mm-hmm. Just listening to this, it's like, what the fuck are these people talking about? I can't keep up with any of this.
Well, here's the main thing. So, them going back to get the stones, that was predetermined. That was what they were allowed to do, because when they took the stones away, they were going to put it back, and no other branch reality was going to happen. Now, there were these small things that they did that could cause branch realities, but this is the question that I want to know, is how much do they pay attention to these time variants, I guess? Because they want a certain set of sequence happening. So like, this person came late to work, therefore they just kind of slowed down traffic just for a little bit, and therefore this other person couldn't go to work or got late to work, and now they couldn't find a cure for cancer or something. I don't know. And so like, what do they pay attention to within that timeline that like makes it so that they want the sacred timeline to be set? Like, that's the thing. Because some people are like paying attention, like, oh, so like if I just get the wrong drink at a restaurant, I'm automatically becoming a time variant. And it's like, maybe they don't pay attention to stuff like that. Maybe it's just certain things that were outside of our decision making process in life.
Well, it kind of has to be, because based on what we've seen in this episode, the time variants don't choose to be time variants. It just is a matter of happenstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like some people were complaining, like, how is Loki a time variant if he did something that, like, of course he would do. Of course he would pick up the Tesseract and everything. But in my mind, it was like, well, maybe the Tesseract wasn't supposed to land on his feet. Maybe the case wasn't supposed to open when Tony let go of the case and everything. It's like they're not getting it because like he decided, oh, I'm gonna go this, and they're like, how dare you become a time variant? It's like, no, this thing happened, you became a time variant, and we're just like trying to set the timeline right. It's just kind of, I don't know. It's all so confusing, and some people probably are tuning out by now, like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to say at this point. That like to me, it has to be a bunch of bullshit, right? Because they're saying like, oh, this is the one and only timeline, but that just can't be true. Mm-hmm. That can't be true based on what we already know and based on what's to come, right? So it's like
unless the show is going to end with Loki tearing down the TVA and let's just let multiple timelines.
Oh, well, that's a theory. That's a new one I haven't heard. So could it be that if Loki destroys the TVA, could that then create the potential to open up the doorways of the multiverse?
Yeah.
And maybe not Wanda? Or maybe Loki sets it up and then Wanda tears it down. That gives Wanda the ability to tear it down.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting theory.
Yeah.
My brain hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that hurt me. Let's see if we can bring things back down to earth. So we move on where Owen Wilson, Mobius, as he's called, saves Loki at the last minute from being reset because he sees some potential in him, especially with the difficulty in the variant that he is trying to track in his own mission. So he assumes responsibility for him, and they head off to a room. But before we get to the room, it appears as if they walk through this outdoor hallway, and you see, and this is where the visual effects, they really delivered this amazing labyrinth of a world that's out there that is just like, you can't really put into words how immense it all looks.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to mention Adam Hlavak from the Heroes Reforged channel. I saw him tweet this, and I think this is a sequence he was referring to, and it made me feel this way too, where he said that he senses the presence of the volume in this episode. Now, the volume is this basically new piece of technology that is, in layman's terms, the next evolution of special effects for film and television. The volume was created for The Mandalorian, especially. If you've seen Disney Gallery on Disney Plus, Behind The Mandalorian, this episode is probably the only one that I think it's worth your time watching, and I think it just transcends what you care about The Mandalorian or not. Although, granted, we're the only ones that don't care about it, so there's that. But it's more about this new piece of technology. Thor: Love and Thunder, the upcoming Marvel film, I think it's one of the first to utilize the volume. And the volume is this piece of technology where instead, in most films where these actors in these big, genre movies, Marvel movies, Star Wars movies, where they have to kind of imagine what they're seeing on this big blue wall or big green wall that we come to see in the actual finished product, that no longer will be the case, where they can just have this big 360 encompassing wall where you can actually see the actual effect what we, the audience, will see in the actual show. And it looked real good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that was the sequence where the volume was used, and it was beautiful. All right. And what happens next, David?
So yeah, Owen Wilson's character saves him from being reset. He takes Loki to a room and basically starts setting up a videotape, and he's gonna show him his life basically, but he's also trying to get into the mind of Loki. It's like, why do you do what you do? Why are you hurting these people? Why do you want to cause mischief? Why do you want to be a king? And I mean, the whole thing was just basically a therapy session for Loki. And so Loki was just kind of like trying to bullshit his way through this whole conversation, but Owen, what's his name, Morbius, he wasn't gonna take it. And now, at first watching this, I was just kind of like, why does Morbius want to question him so much? I didn't really see as to why he wanted Loki in that moment. But I'm just gonna reveal the ending. But I actually completely skipped a scene. Well, you kind of mentioned it, but yeah, the first time we meet Morbius, he's looking at a dead body. He's at a church. He's looking at a dead body, and they basically establish that he's trying to catch a time variant, one that just keeps getting away from him. And at the end, they tell us that the time variant that they're trying to look for is Loki. Some people are theorizing that it's Lady Loki, who she is going to be in the show and everything, but I don't know about that. But I mean, we can talk about that later. And so yeah, so when first watching the scene where Morbius is trying to talk to Loki, basically give him a therapy session, I was kind of confused as to why he was so interested in him, as to why he wanted to like just kind of quickly get to him on their side and help them out on the time variant. But now I kind of see that it was two things. One, he has Loki right here. I think the more he can get inside Loki, the more he can find the time variant Loki and all that. And so like he was just trying to like understand how this Loki is working, and maybe that can help him catch time variant Loki. But also he wanted to get Loki on his side, because who else can the God of Mischief? How else can you catch the God of Mischief than the God of Mischief himself? And I was really liking how he got in his mind, and I love that the MCU just keeps putting Thor: The Dark World as such an important piece of the MCU, even though it's kind of like the most hated out of everyone. Oh my god.
It almost makes you wonder, man. There's some pretty seismic events that happen for these characters in the Dark World. Imagine what it would have been like if it were actually good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's talk about this, right? So this is a series of sequences that are really just they're so well done. They're so well done, and they really kind of I think the best part of the episode where they really get to the heart of who this character is, and I love scenes like this. I love him, and it was about time, honestly. It's about time. It was like, man, I've waited a long time to really get to know this character on this level, and here we are. So I was happy to see this conversation being had. And in the moments that you brought up, especially with the Dark World, in the moment, it just reminded you, like, man, I wish that movie were good. And like, considering how much weight it was intended to have, what a missed opportunity across the board, especially with how it just wasted Rene Russo. The second time Rene Russo comes back from the dead as Frigga, and it reminds you, like, man, I wish they used the character the way they're using it now, as such an emotional anchor for both of her sons. How she was used brilliantly in Endgame, and now here she is again. And Rene Russo didn't come back to do any scenes. Like, these were just literally lifted from the Dark World. And yet, and this is different. It feels different because I guess one of the things the Dark World, I think, didn't really put much weight into was the fact that Loki indirectly led to Frigga's death.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that.
I didn't at all, because the movie didn't make you think about it. It just moved on. Like, it showed Loki being sad that Frigga passed away. Yeah, that's it. So here we have a different perspective of it, and I love the reaction from Hiddleston. Just like, because it's moments like those that remind you, like, oh, like in Avengers, he's a pretty bad guy. In many moments, pretty maniacal. As he progressed throughout the Dark World and Ragnarok, and there was more of, I guess, there was more of a human in there and less of a sociopath as the movies went along. And it's moments like this that remind you that maybe like Loki has always been this really conflicted character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because that you see human moments like these that you do wonder, where does that maniacal ferociousness come from? Why does he do these things, right? As to the point as to what Mobius really, that's kind of the question he wants to get at. It's like, why do you choose to be this? I think implying that he could be so much more than what he is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Although with Loki, it's like, well, I am so much more. I am destined to be so much more. And it also is an interesting elaboration, not maybe not elaboration, but maybe more of an analyzation of his ideology. You know, it wasn't so much front and center in Avengers. He does say in the movie, as it's replayed here, about life's greatest lie or something, that freedom is a lie and that you crave subjugation, and freedom diminishes life's value through an endless scramble for power or something like that. That really wasn't examined all that much in the movie Avengers, but here it's like, okay, well, I guess we get to know you a little bit more. Like, this is your actual ideology here. I guess it's because he feels that a lot of the realities about his life were just as far as like him being from Jotunheim and then being adopted as Odin's second son, and him being raised to think maybe he had a chance of being king. Maybe, I don't know, like a lot of the things that he wants were just never his to begin with, and maybe that's kind of where all this comes from, is that he has known disappointment because of free will. I don't know. I'm just trying to. I'm shooting for blanks here.
No, I mean he was told that he had a chance to become great, but realizing that he wasn't Odin's like biological son, that he was basically the enemy's. He wasn't even a Asgardian basically, and so he came to realize that he probably never had a chance to become king or anything. It was just predetermined from when he was a kid that he wasn't going to be as great as Thor, basically. And so he decided to take that into his own hands, trying to take over Asgard, and then later on trying to take over the Earth. And I mean, he failed at that. He failed at both things. And so then he comes here, and Owen Wilson's character, Morbius, that's his name, I always forget. Morbius is telling him, like, why'd you want to do this in the first place? And he's just like, oh, well, I mean, I'm just meant to be king, really. Like, what else is there? Or, like, what else anyone wants to be, basically. And it's like, okay, fine, you want to be leader, and then what are you going to do? It's just like, just going to rule over everyone, going to give them, what did he say exactly? I don't remember exactly what he said, but like, basically he just kind of wanted to control everyone because he doesn't believe that everyone deserves free will, basically, and he just kind of wants to, basically what the time variants are doing, predetermine what they want, predetermine their destinations, I guess, so that they can, either he can become the best self, or maybe just kind of create the best self in this society, I guess. But then Morbius just kind of like, he really puts him down and everything. It's just like, you do these things all the time, and all it is for you, and you do these things, and all it is for, it's meant for you to fail. You're meant to fail, basically, in life. You fail taking over Asgard, you fail taking over the world, and you're going to fail later on, just so people can become better. Just so people can try to overthrow you and become better. And it's just kind of like bullshit and all that. And Morbius was getting close to getting into his mind, but then he got interrupted. Basically, what was it? No, I think they just found another spot where time variant Loki was at and everything. But what ended up happening was the collar that Loki had. What it is, it's just kind of like a teleporter, I guess. So anytime he tries to do anything, they just click a button and he'll like move back to where he was from, I guess, or move wherever they moved him from. When Morbius left because he got interrupted, Loki took that remote and then he started going around the whole, I guess, time variant office. And he finds the Tesseract. They took the Tesseract from him, and he gets it back.
That ain't all he finds.
Yeah, he gets it back from Pillboy.
yeah, that's right. From The Good Place. Yeah. He's great. Mm-hmm. I thought you'd recognize his face. Yeah.
No, how can I forget? He was hilarious in the show. Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he tries to find a Tesseract. He finds it, but when he does, he also finds the Infinity Stones, just like multiple Infinity Stones in this desk drawer or something like that.
A random desk drawer.
Yeah, and he's just
used for paperweights.
Yeah, Pillboy. He's just like, oh yeah, we got tons of those. I mean, we all just use them for paperweights. Really, it's no big deal. And that's when it kind of like sinks in with Loki, because at first he was just kind of like, he thinks Morbius is bullshitting him. He thinks everything in his future wasn't going to happen and all that. But then when he realizes that, like, he's seeing the actual Infinity Stones in his hand, like, he can tell that it's real. And it starts to sink in on him that, like, oh shoot, like, I'm in a place that is beyond this universe. He says, like, is this really the greatest power in the universe? And Pillboy's just like, yeah, really? Yeah, basically. And does he go back straight to the office, or what does he do?
At that point, he is found out by the security guard that wants to kill him. He transports himself back to the office. And I think at that moment, he then begins to see the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so now that he knows that it's like, this is real, he starts looking at his future. And the next one, it was, he's seeing his mom die again. He sees his dad's death, but he also sees that, he calls him his son. He can tell, like, in his future self that, like, he's clearly going to miss his dad and everything. And then he sees him and Thor getting along, being brothers again, basically. And then he sees his death. Thanos snapping his neck and everything. And, I mean, I guess he kind of just realizes that, like, almost his life is a bit of a joke. Like, he really is just kind of meant to fail. And he gets in a fight with some security guard and everything, but he gets the upper hand, takes off his collar, puts it in the security guard, and like starts sending her somewhere else and everything. I thought that was pretty funny. But Morbius, he comes back to the office, and then that's when Loki tells him, like, fine, I never liked hurting people. I just did it because I wanted to seem strong. I just did it because hurting people is the only way you can seem strong. It's the only way for people weak like me to feel strong.
That's a great way of paraphrasing it. Let me have the actual words here. I don't enjoy hurting people. I don't enjoy it. I do it because I have to, because I've had to. Because it's part of the illusion. It's the cruel, elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear. Great line. And maybe that's the closest Loki's ever been to being honest with himself.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. I think even Morbius says that too. I don't remember. But
Oh, by the way, I think it's Mobius, not Morbius. Let me just, because I think Morbius is like a Spider-Man character.
yeah, I was thinking that too. I was like, it can't be more. Like it literally just hit me. Like that's the guy. That's the vampire dude. Morbius. I don't know. If it's Mobius, I'll say that. Fine.
Yeah.
Um.
It is Mobius.
Okay. So Mobius also says that. Like, I think that's probably the most honest he's ever been.
Yeah. We don't want to get Jack Schaefer and have these Marvel fans like sick us for getting two characters mixed up, Morbius and Mobius.
I mean, it's just one letter.
I know, but you know,
to the people I'm talking to, it's just like,
yeah,
relax.
So, real quick, a lot of things happened. So, there was some great reaction from Twitter, you know, with oh man, just some things we missed. It was so funny. And Twitter really pointed a lot of these out. So Alicia Grasso really pointed this out. I had forgotten how funny the moment is when Loki temporarily has an existential crisis and wonders if he's a robot.
Oh my god, yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah. It's just like, how do people not know they're not robots? It's just like, guy looks at him like,
am I a robot?
Yeah. It's so funny too, because that's something I would definitely do. Like, as soon as someone explains it, I'll be like, how could I not be a robot? And then I mentioned this in our text, but like when they said like, please let us know if you're a robot or something like that, and my first thought was Coulson, because like, right, he had that little existential crisis of like, am I a robot? Am I a human being? Like, what am I? And so that was funny.
No, it was terrific. Actually, let me see. Tara O'Shea responded to Alicia Grasso's tweet saying that, I'm genuinely surprised I didn't have an LMD Coulson moment when I'm just going to assume it was implied. I guess you weren't the only one thinking that. Yeah. Alicia Grasso actually responded here real quick that, and she seems a little miffed, which I wasn't sure she was a fan of this, but I am reading this in real time, so just to be clear with you, so they are pretty clearly trying to do everything possible to show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is non-canon. It's kind of a bummer, but I get it. Let's stick a pin in that real quick about the S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, okay? Other things, there's this you know, the meme of SpongeBob at the diner with him in a cup of coffee, just, you know, in this look of an existential crisis. You know which one I'm talking about? Yeah. Let me just. So there's this one going around with, instead of coffee in front of him, there's the Tesseract, and it's pretty. And the text says, "Loki waiting for Mobius to come back to the room after seeing his whole life."
That's good. That's really good.
These are funny. No, in this one, I gotta say, this one made me laugh so hard because of how fucked up. I mean, it's funny, and it's fucked up, but it's also funny. And it deals with Natasha. So this is a screen grab of the drawer full of these infinity gems that we just mentioned. And the tweet says, Nat died for the Soul Stone, only for the TVA to have 3 in a desk drawer.
Yeah, I really don't understand that criticism. Like,
I don't think that. Okay, when I read this tweet, I didn't take it as legitimate criticism. I just thought of it as like a funny thing, but I didn't know, and I guess you're the one that's saying that there are people who are legitimately criticizing this.
They absolutely hate that part because they're like, because for one thing, we've been watching 22 movies all leading up to the Infinity Stones coming together, like the greatest power in this universe coming together and everything. And so for this show to just kind of like use it as paperweights, as nothing, like some people hate it. And I'm like, they're in a dimension that is beyond our universe, and like they control time and space. Like, I mean, they literally control this entire universe. Like, of course, these Infinity Stones are going to mean nothing to them and everything. And so, and then I just don't understand when they're like, wow, the Soul Stone or like these Infinity Stones are like right there, and I'm just kind of like, do you think the Avengers are just gonna go, let's go to the TVA and get the Infinity Stones? Like, that's not, like, they don't know shit. And so, I don't know, I genuinely don't understand the criticism here. Like, yeah, they have Infinity Stones. I guess, yeah, they see it as nothing, but it doesn't really downplay, at least for me, like, the power that these stones have still in our universe. Again, this is an alternate dimension. And so I don't know. I just find it so weird that people like absolutely hate that part.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm shocked. People actually. Well, yeah, I guess I shouldn't be shocked. I really shouldn't be shocked.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it funny. I just think, I mean, but like, people are saying like, well, it ruins the movies or it ruins the No, it really doesn't.
No.
Like, if it does for you, that's a shame.
Yeah.
That really is. But I mean, I'll tell you another one that I saw here that was hilarious. It has a picture of Wanda walking around the TVA. They just photoshopped her from WandaVision, and the text says, Wanda currently on her way to destroy the TVA facility upon discovering they kept a Mind Stone and a Soul Stone, so Vision and Nat died for nothing. Reports say she already destroyed Miss Minute. Just hilarious. But I forgot to mention that too, Miss Minute. The sequence, the animated sequence about like the TV and everything, that was phenomenal. That was straight out of like a Disney Q line that you would yeah.
Yeah, I heard people saying that too. My thought was just like, oh, I like this 90s cartoon aesthetics that they're going on, that they have.
So yeah, that's I think that's what I got. And was there anything else? Oh, the Coulson thing.
Mm.
Okay. All right. So it was nice to see Clark Gregg.
Yeah.
What did you think was the point of a whole part of the deep dive into Loki's psyche to include Coulson in this?
I don't know. Honestly, I just kind of thought like, oh yeah, here it is. It's just, I mean, I kind of just saw it like as a recap of what's happened before the first Avengers movie, and so, or what happened during the Avengers movie too. But I mean, I didn't really think that they were gonna like tell him that he's alive or anything, just because they're trying not to talk about the shows or anything. But after thinking about it, like, they could still tell him, like, that could still be like a big reveal. Like, you never really hurt anyone, I guess. I don't know, or he never. No, he hurt a lot of people.
He hurt a lot of people. Yeah, it was like,
yeah.
It's not as if Coulson was the only person Loki killed. I mean,
I don't know. I don't think they're gonna do much with it. I think it was just for that scene.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm of two minds of it. It does seem like they picked that moment out maybe to help to better help with the whole, I guess, story they're trying to tell, or they're trying to get at, Loki's psyche here, right? So maybe this is why it makes most sense for Coulson. But there were a couple of people online that were thinking more to it, because it's just like Coulson's never really brought up like at all. Like,
Mhm.
even in Captain Marvel, he was just kind of in the background. So it's interesting to him not only like have like a name drop, but then also avert like him being on screen. And I don't know why, but like for like a second, I thought to myself, because I think there was a couple of seconds where like, yeah, when Loki says I killed him, and I was thinking, they're not, they didn't, but I was thinking like, they're not gonna, are they gonna, could they say it here? Like, oh, like, how easy could it have been for Mobius to say, yeah, he's not really dead, and then they just move on?
Yeah.
How easy could that have been?
Mm-hmm.
Was that too much to ask for? Honestly, was that too much to ask for?
It could have added to the whole like he's gonna keep failing in life. Basically, it's like, yeah, you killed him, and I brought the Avengers together to stop you, like, and cause you to failure with your plan, and then just to kind of like hone in on that, like you also failed to kill him, but kill him, by the way, like they brought him back to life later on, multiple times.
Yeah, let me see some of the tweets here to this moment. Jamie Jirac from the Phase Zero podcast, as well as Hollywood Did It, and one of the only journalists to actually cover S.H.I.E.L.D. All the way through its conclusion, tweeting out a screen grab of Coulson from Loki, saying, me thinking this Loki moment is foreshadowing a Coulson cameo. Boy, how cool would that be if that were, guess kind of what you were thinking. Maybe that could happen. Let's see here. Paul Tassi, and this one I just noticed today, he evidently is a writer for video games and TV for Forbes. Wow. And he says, it bothers me more than it should that no MCU property is ever going to acknowledge Phil Coulson came back to life for like 7 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So there's that. Join the club, man. Eric Goldman, formerly of IGN, now with Fandom, tweets out, really dug the premiere, but man, you can still feel that old Marvel Studios / Marvel Television divide when they so easily could mention Coulson coming back after Avengers, to the point I was sure they would for a second, but then don't. And then you also got to put in that tweet by Alicia Grasso, where it's like, they are pretty clearly trying to do everything possible to show S.H.I.E.L.D. as non-canon. It's kind of a bummer, but I get it. Your reaction to these reactions. I will note, of course, as we do here, any headline regarding this show, I usually have ready with me. As of this moment, surprisingly enough, there have been no major headlines that say, did Loki just decanonize S.H.I.E.L.D.? Or did Loki do this? Like, you know how we did with WandaVision and all the other ones. So, to my knowledge, no such article has been written or published just yet. So, but if it is, you know, come listen next week and you'll know that I'll tell you all about it. What do you make of all of these reactions so far? Like, I personally don't expect anything at this point, but it would be cool, you know?
I mean, yeah, it'd be nice and everything. But I mean, yeah, I don't really expect them to acknowledge really Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, and I mean, if they do, best show.
Right? but seriously, like, how that, it was so easy.
Yeah.
It was within reach. It was right there. It was, all you had to say was, you ain't dead. You didn't have to. Okay, let's move on. So it ends with Loki committing to, I guess, a new glorious purpose. What that is, I guess we'll have to see. And then a little bit of a teaser for episode 2 in I guess it's revealed that the variant that they're actually on the hunt for is Loki, which I believe you also, I think, mentioned earlier in the episode already. That is a good twist, although I think it kind of became obvious with how much time we were analyzing Loki. But you say there's a chance it could be Lady Loki?
Yeah, some people are theorizing that it's her. I don't know, because when you first meet Mobius, they said, like, oh, it's probably him, or like he's probably somewhere, or he's probably gone by now. They're using the word he. Now, the thing, though, that some people have been pointing out is that Loki is gender fluid. So it could still be female Loki, going by he, or it could be another male Loki, which I want to say it is, because that scene in the trailer where he's wearing a suit with like a pin and you see the horns and everything, that could be alternate Loki. I don't know.
Well, since you brought it up, this, how do we know that Loki is gender fluid? Because to my recollection, that has never once been mentioned. Well, in the episode, when you look, if you're watching the episode with a magnifying glass, in that one brief instance where they show his case file at the TVA, there is a classification that he is apparently gender fluid. I don't know if this was something that they did to pander to Pride Month. I don't know if this is, or maybe it wasn't for Pride. Maybe it was just because it's Disney and they keep doing this. Before I get into that rant, so this is the part where we mentioned this gender fluid issue. So I had asked for you to watch a video by Council of Geeks, Nathaniel Wayne, who is a gender fluid, the real gender fluid person, and her take on how she feels of this quote unquote representation. This is such bullshit. I like, all right, unless there is something substantial that is going to be taken with this, and we have to hold reservation on that, right? Because we're in episode 1 of 6 episodes. There is, in all likelihood, a real good possibility of Lady Loki being featured in this. Remember, in the trailer, there was this one shot of Loki sitting next to a woman in this very purple environment, looking off into the distance. Maybe that is Loki and Lady Loki sharing a moment together. It could very well be that. But that really is beside the point. The thing is, as Nathaniel says in the video, it's kind of become a joke at this point. When Disney like announces via press release, they don't like let the movie speak for itself. They announce it to the world that, oh, this film happens to have a queer character or a character in the LGBTQ plus community, but you wouldn't know it if hit in the face, because it almost always ends up being something like this, where it's like, oh, it's the kind of representation that isn't representation. It's just in the background that can be easily just like censored off. Like when Onward had this cop that talked about her girlfriend, or when the infamous LeFou situation, like having an exclusively gay moment. Remember, those are the words the press release used. And in this instance, like, you know, there was a whole bunch of headlines out there that, oh yeah, Loki is gender fluid. And it's kind of like groan inducing, because like, this is a character that we've seen like for many movies. At what point did this character show any kind of signs that he was this. Like, why?
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing for me. Have there been headlines saying that Marvel is announcing that Loki is gender fluid? Now, again, that Marvel or Kevin Feige is saying that, like, they're making a big announcement that Loki is gender fluid. Because from what I've been seeing, it's just been a bunch of basically just like the nerdy websites all pointing out that they found it themselves in a video that Loki is gender fluid. Like, I haven't seen any headlines that.
Well,
Marvel
let me have it. I
announced
have it here for you, Mr. Francisco. On IGN, Loki confirmed to be gender fluid. Tom Hiddleston calls Loki's gender fluidity a logical conclusion. And then this is how the article is written. Marvel has confirmed that Loki is gender fluid in the MCU, bringing this version of the character closer to the comic book iterations of the Norse god. The news comes by way of Slash Film, which caught the revelation in a video posted on Twitter by the official Loki account. The video is par for the course of Marvel and Disney Loki's marketing, but eagle-eyed viewers have spotted Loki's sex as fluid in the first frame of the video, which you can see below. Inverse spoke to Tom Hiddleston, who has played Loki in the MCU for over a decade, and the Disney Plus head writer Michael Waldron about the character's gender fluidity. I know how many people identify with Loki in particular, and are eager for that representation, especially with this character, Waldron told Inverse. We worked really hard. Hiddleston told Inverse that Loki's gender fluidity has always been there in the comics for some time, and in the history of the character for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This is a reference to the Loki seen in countless Marvel comics where the character is a shapeshifter, much like the MCU counterpart, although the shapeshifting occurs far more frequently in the comics. Loki can shapeshift into other characters, animals, a male version of the Norse god, a female version, and more. As Inverse points out, Loki's appearance and gender are constantly in flux. Inverse's report also points out that Loki's shape-shifting abilities were previously often used for disguise reasons rather than outright gender expression. So, to recap, Waldron told Inverse that it's best experienced in the show as opposed to me, a cis straight white guy, giving clunky answers about it. Walden credits the show's director, Kate Herron, for Loki's gender fluid confirmation, however. That was so important to Kate that we did that justice. Everyone will have to watch and see. Hiddleston further touched on his character's gender fluidity when speaking to Inverse, explaining that the breadth and range of identity contained in the character has been emphasized and is something that I was always aware of when I was cast 10 years ago. I know it was important to Kate Herron and Michael Waldron and to the whole team, and we were very aware this is something we felt responsible for. So this is Tom Hiddleston, Kate Herron, Michael Waldron, Marvel confirming this, and this. I based on what I just read, I cannot for a second believe they are talking about the moment we're talking about in episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about it as if they actually did something with this and that it's going to come in the following weeks. Because let me just tell you something. If this entire article was for what this case file saying that he was gender fluid, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
If that's the case, that's fucking pathetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. No, and I was just kind of wondering because, like, it just for me it seemed like they're not making this that much of a big deal as they've done with other properties, like with the Pixar.
Well, they are. Movie. You have it right here. It looks like they are making it a big deal.
I didn't read that article, but like I don't know. It's just for me, it was just kind of weird. Like the first thing we saw was other websites analyzing some teaser, and then they found it, and then it was Marvel that was just like, yeah, he's gender fluid, and so I was just kind of like, huh, it does. Again, it didn't seem like they were making that big of a deal, but then after reading this, though, like, yeah, it does seem like there
They are.
might be something more. And my theory could be that it could be Lady Loki, um, could be like the villain of this show. And what I can think of what they can do to her is that her reason as to why she's going against the TVA, is because she was taken out of existence, basically. Like, a Lady Loki doesn't exist in this sacred timeline. And she doesn't want that. Like, she wants to exist in her own universe, basically. And I mean that could be a reason for Lady Loki. And then you could just have a moment where, I don't know, maybe her and Loki just kind of like decide to switch places or something. I don't know.
Well, it better be the case, because honestly, I'm fed up with bullshit like this. Come on, sure. Especially if it's like a fucking like piece of paper that says something and that's it. Again, reading this, I can't imagine they're talking about this, like, these are crumbs, man. What the fuck?
Yeah.
And if they are, fuck them. Mm-hmm. Honestly, that's awful. Yeah, that was. So there was that. Overall, very strong. It made a big impression, and when this episode finished, I'm like, yep, I need this. I need this weekly, and I can't wait to do this every single week. It's like I've missed this. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. Final thoughts on the first episode of Loki, Mr. Francisco.
I'm curious as to what's gonna happen next. Really, that's basically it.
Aren't we all? Well, before we leave today, we have a couple of housekeeping, items to get to. So Elizabeth Olsen confirmed that WandaVision will not have a season 2. To which the entire community of Red Spotlight collectively breathed a sigh of relief. Because like none of us had asked for a season 2. In fact, we'd asked, look, it was so good, you can't top it. There's no more story to go. Thanks, but no thanks. Mm-hmm. And I think that message was received loud and clear, it seems.
Yeah, and I mean, they can make another show about Wanda, but like, it'll be completely different from what we first got, and I feel like you just can't really call it WandaVision. It'll have to be something else or something. But yeah, no, I'm kind of glad. I think the show did what it needed to do, which is, like I said, like it focused on her grief, basically, of like who she's lost in this universe and all that. And I think we could just. I think she should just get her own movie afterwards. After this, depending on what happens to her in the next Avengers movie when we get to it. But yeah, no, I'm glad.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, because this wasn't mentioned a few weeks ago, and in the interest of being fair, I'm not going to dive too deep into it, if only because I think I've already babbled on enough about S.H.I.E.L.D. But you know how weeks ago we did this unloading of like headline after headline after headline of just like all of this negativity about it, right? Well, 3 weeks ago about or so, Screen Rant actually published an article that said the MCU has done a huge disservice to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So if you want to read and go check it out, there it is on Screen Rant. I wanted to bring that up because we obviously bring up all the negative articles, and so in the interest of being fair, here's one that was like, hey, what the fuck, Marvel? So go and do that. what else did I want to say here? Right. So this has nothing to do. Well, actually, you know what? Before we do that, what did you think of the Eternals trailer? I already gave my thoughts with Peter Martinez in last week's show, I think. What did you make of Eternals?
I kind of liked it. It's I mean, there's really not much information to process. I just kind of I'm interested in as to like what they mean when they're finally interfering in the world and everything. But I'm also just I'm more so interested in the director. Like she clearly wants she wants practical sets and everything, and I'm kind of curious, like, okay, let's see the difference now between a practical set and not just a fucking green screen.
Practical sets and visual effects that are not green screen and CGI.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, will it look better than any other MCU movie? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying it's gonna make it that it's already going to be better than any MCU movie. Like, no, I mean, I'm curious what the story's going to be, what they mean by that they're finally going to interfere within the world and all that. It's just from a visual aspect, I'm curious.
Yeah.
The characters, I mean, this is one that I mean, besides Loki, like, this is one that I have absolutely no idea what's it about. Don't know nothing about these characters. But yeah, I mean, I'll watch it.
Yeah, I will too. Before we get off here tonight, I wanted to mention, I don't know when I'm gonna have the chance to even say any of this. With Fantasy Fair podcast, we are planning a podcast on this, but I wanted to do this now. This is delving into the theme park space, but it is connected to Marvel and everything. You will be forgiven for forgetting or not even realizing that Disney unveiled a Marvel-themed land at its theme park last week. Enlarged so because it really is just about as nothing of a nothing burger can get when it comes to the experience. I don't know, David, if you yourself have seen any of the images or are aware of what very little there is to offer at the so-called Avengers campus. And I say this as somebody who is oftentimes, not oftentimes, I'm a starch defender and maybe even at times apologist for some of the shortcomings at the Disney parks. This is an embarrassment. This is abysmal. This is without question the most this is the weakest thing they've done in a long time from a thematic perspective, from a design standpoint, from any level of ambition that was clearly sucked out of this project from a vacuum when they fired Joe Rohde. Which I blame Bob Chapek for that, of course. Bob Chapek, who is at that point was the head of the parks department and now the head of the Disney company. And it's a hallway with a building or two and a Spider-Man version of Toy Story Midway Mania alongside the amazing Mission Breakout, which was already open like 4 years ago. I'm sorry, this is just a failure on every level. Mission Breakout not including in this, but it is just a failure on every level. From a distance, the idea that this is something that the Disney company is launching a marketing campaign for people all over the world to come and see, I predict will backfire massively on them. Because this is not anyone's idea of what a Marvel-themed land should be like. You are taking the single biggest movie franchise of the last 10 years, and you created a collection of buildings in a street. I honestly would pay to see the look on people's faces when they've paid that much money to go to see it and to realize, this is it? This is what all the hype was?
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen... I've mostly just seen the footage of Spider-Man walking around the campus, and you get that slingshot thing that they got going on, which, I mean, that's cool. But not really much else, so I don't really know like everything about the campus and everything. But
there is a Spider-Man attraction that is just a copy of Midway Mania. There is a restaurant that is themed to Hank Pym, where they make like these misshaped food items. There is a walkthrough where you get to meet Doctor Strange and then take photos with him, and they have like a little like magical journey. It's not really anything. And then you see, which maybe the only good thing about it is great character interactions. They have stunt shows. They have great meet and greets. And that's it. And for this, people waited 6 hours to get into, if they could even get into it. And that's including if they actually were able to get on the app and get their boarding pass to ride the only new ride in this land. Yeah.
Oh.
So more on this on Fantasy Fair Podcast, where Kyle, Lira, and Alexis Moreno will definitely take the reins. Do check out at some point. They have the exclusive review for Cruella. As far as Red Spotlight is concerned, we just did some reviews with Peter Martinez. I hope you listened to it, David. I really enjoyed the films Minari, Promising Young Woman, and especially The Father. What an amazing powerhouse of a movie. I would really encourage you all to watch those films. And then our next episode with Peter, we're going to review the films we went back to the theaters for. We saw A Quiet Place Part 2 and The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. An amazing double feature, yes. And we'll be talking about those movies soon. And then, I would assume the following week, we'll be talking about In the Heights, directed by John Chu and with Lin-Manuel Miranda. And then, unbelievably enough, with all of the new movies coming out this month, you know what else is coming out next week and no one's talking about it? Disney Pixar's Luca.
I didn't even know that.
No, nobody knew that. Everybody forgot about that. It's coming out next week. Maybe it's because it's not getting a theatrical run. It's only going to go on Disney Plus, which makes me more pissed off.
Yeah, I get it. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about it. Wow. I mean, it could be that, but it could also be just because we're more so excited about movies that are coming out in theaters. So.
Yeah, like literally, I if Luca came out in the theater, I would go right now. Honestly, I would go right now. If this is my only chance, I would go right now and see it. Wow. I'm pissed. So yeah, there is all the stuff that's coming in the next coming month. And keeping in mind, of course, we're going to balance all this somehow while delivering a top 10 list. How? I don't know. Stay tuned and maybe you'll get it. Maybe you won't. Thank you all for listening. Stay under the spotlight for all of our podcasts. Anywhere you listen to podcasts. Spotify, Apple, CastBox, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. Anywhere. Literally anywhere. Thank you, David. Thank you all for listening. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.